Aston. Yeah, we haven't had a PCC meeting. We did have a meeting this morning with our Dutch comrades, which I was late for. But anyway, that one aside, what I thought I would do this week is concentrate on the elections, Thursday's elections. And of course, that's loads of council elections, but also elections in Wales and in Scotland. So, we all know the result. I have got it all written down for what it's worth, So, what is it? Reform for 1,453 seats. That's a gain of 1,451. These results, by the way, they might be changing, i.e., going up. I'm not quite sure of disputed counts and all the rest of it, but we all know the broad outline. So reform, yeah, nearly 1,500 council seats in total, and given where they're starting from, remember this isn't all council seats being contested, but given where they're starting from, it's massive leap by reform. Labour, now my understanding is, again, I haven't sort of chased this one up, my understanding is precisely because we're dealing with the Labour Party being in a council terms in a strong position, but also with not all council seats being contested, Labour still remains, the figure I've got somewhere is 53% of council seats are still Labour. So Labour, in terms of this particular contest, lost 1,496, which left them in terms of retaining or gains. I think there might have been a couple of gains because of first past the post system comes in. They retained, or retained with that caveat, 1,068. Liberal Democrats are meant to be pleased with the result, pretty modest, up 155. Nothing to write home about, but better than getting a drubbing, isn't it? And one thing that hasn't featured, which I don't know whether I'm surprised by or not, is the Tories. I just don't read commentary on that. And to me, that's the sort of surprising result, if there's anything that you would say in normal times you'd be expecting, is the main opposition party to be shooting up, by-elections, council elections, opinion polls. But no, what we've got is the Tories retaining 801 seats, but losing 563. Now, that's a long way behind Labour, but nonetheless, that is a significant result. And to me, the sort of mystery, when I read the sort of mainstream press, and I'm not just blaming the right, so I look at the Telegraph, I look at the Mail, I look at the Sun, but, the Guardian's the same thing. It's Starmer, Labour loses big time. I've not heard a thing about the Tories. Maybe they've learnt their lesson in terms of replacing leaders. I don't know. But it wasn't that long ago that we had talk of Kemi, living on borrowed time. But she describes this bizarrely as progress. Well, I find that hard to credit. Now, if you wanted a description of it, a generous description with her, you could describe her leadership as one step forward, but definitely it's two steps back, isn't it, in terms of opinion polls? And there's the result on Thursday, an actual loss, a significant loss of councillors. Now, of course, the important thing about councillors isn't just that this is a test of opinion polls, in terms of what people actually vote. Councillors matter in terms of mass politics. Here are your, your people on the ground. Here's your cadre force, to use a phrase, when it comes to the general election. General elections, yes, are won in terms of big national politics, but in terms of your structure on the ground, increasingly parties rely on councillors and other such representatives. And of course, the other big news from Thursday is not only reform gaining big, more modest, but nonetheless, I think still of considerable significance, is, of course, the Green Party. And they now have, if I read my writing right, 587 in terms of what was contested. And that's up 441. So nowhere near reform, but nonetheless, still a significant step forward. Definitely not 2 steps back, not staying still, definitely going forward. And of course, in London, we now have Green Mayor, don't we? In Lambeth and in Hackney. Amazing stuff. And I was in, I'm not saying it counts for anything, but just as an anecdote, I was actually in Hackney on Thursday, just on the bus. And I just noticed, just looking at the windows of people, the only posters that I saw were Green Party. So am I surprised? I don't know. Either way, we've gone, I think, from the where that was normal in politics to where it's sort of something I actually noticed. So I didn't see any Tory. I didn't see any Labour around my area. I'm in Camden. The Labour Party hung on, by its claws. The only people, for what it's worth, again, who canvassed me repeatedly were the Lib Dems. Apparently, I live in a marginal ward. I think it's marginal Tory and Lib Dem. Either way, these results are clearly significant. I haven't looked at the independents. The independents stand, in terms of the contested seats here, at 212, and that's up 34. Now, who the 34 are, I don't know. I did read the Your Party missive. I remember looking at the Your Party saying, come out canvassing for us. This was, I think, on a Tuesday, just before the election. I mean, God help us. And canvassing for who? I'm not quite sure, but they're sort of claiming, which I think is a bit on the cheeky side, they're claiming a huge victory in Tower Hamlets, where they weren't standing. They were backing Aspire, who already are the sort of dominant party in Tower Hamlets. And of course, that's got a very complex history, basically. It's a split, basically, from the Labour Party, but also it would include, in terms of its prehistory, of course, respect and all of that stuff. Either way, I haven't looked at the results of the left, and I suspect if there were any drums to bang, I would have heard it. But I'm just not going to go there. In terms of what I understand, the left, however you define the left, basically got marginal results. I'm sure some were better. On the other hand, some would just be the ordinary, 1%, 2%, maybe a bit more here or there. Okay. So what's the big news? The big news, of course, isn't what's going to happen in this council chamber or that council chamber. The big news, what the press are going for, what the BBC, ITV, Sky, and all the rest are going for, is the speculation around Keir Starmer. I sort of feel I've been here before on this particular story. Was it 2 weeks ago? Was it 3 weeks ago? There was going to be this big vote in Parliament, and we had all this speculation Was Sir Keir going to fall on his sword, and were Labour MPs going to? I can't. I mean, some did. To me, it was a sort of non-story. Of course, there is a story about Labour. There is a story about the Labour leadership, but it didn't come to anything. For what it's worth nothing because it comes from me. What do I know about what's going on in the minds of Labour MPs? Let alone in Westminster. I'm not in Westminster. I'm not going around, the palace and the tea rooms and the bars and all the rest of it. But this is the story. And of course, what we have is usual stuff about Wes Streeting and his supporters not going for it, not challenging Sir Keir. But if Sir Keir steps down, well, isn't that a surprise? Angela Rayner, same thing. And we have the usual stupid stories, about Andy Burnham apparently being given a seat. Oh, here you are. Here's my seat. You have it, Andy. Andy goes, oh, that's really generous of you. It doesn't work like that. I don't know how journalists, I mean, how do they get away with that when it comes to sub-editing? Do they sub-edit articles anymore? Isn't there an editor anymore that says, go away, rewrite that stupid story? Or is it just there to get people like you and me reading the stupid stories and then saying this is a stupid story? Talking about stupid stories, of course, we do have Catherine West, who I'd never heard of. I readily confess, I don't suppose anyone here, unless you are a follower of junior ministerial positions and you're a real sort of Westminster wonk, I don't suspect anyone has heard of her before. Either way, she's threatening on Monday that if no one else in the cabinet, she's not in the cabinet, of course, never been in the cabinet. So I think she was a Foreign Office junior minister of something or other. But she's saying if no one from the cabinet runs, she's going to run. And the description I've heard of her from one wag isn't a stalking horse, but a stalking donkey. Make of that what you will. And what I wanted to wave about, just to illustrate the level of commentary here, is the Westminster correspondent of the Telegraph. Now, the Telegraph used to have a reputation of, good reporting. Okay, we all know it's a right-wing paper. It's never hidden that it's a right-wing paper, but it used to separate the news, which was meant to be hard news, from commentary. So I'm taking it that our correspondent here, whose name is Sabrina Miller, is writing news, and she's commenting on our gallant Catherine West, MP for Hornsey and Friend Barnet, just to the north of me. And she's saying that she's backed by the left. And she's apparently, she was given some sort of shadow ministerial position under Corbyn, who wasn't sort of type idea. But apparently, according to our Telegraph correspondent here, that is in spite of her. She was a junior Foreign Office minister under Starmer, in spite of her background in the left wing, believe it or not. I was just about to read Socialist Campaign, no, not Socialist Campaign Group, but her background in the Fabian Society. Again, I don't know what to make of these journalists sometimes. I mean, are they serious? Are they really serious? Was that a slip? I don't know. I haven't bothered looking up Catherine West and her membership of the Fabian Society, but at last time I looked, my impression of the Labour Party is the Fabians are on the traditional right wing. I don't know whether she's a member of the Fabians. Anyway, so I'm just saying that a lot of this commentary, I find it hard to take seriously. I'm sure if you go around Westminster, and I don't know whether you wear a badge, say I'm from the Telegraph and I'm from this, I'm from the BBC, you'll get Labour MPs coming up to you and mouthing off. Some will be coming up with this leak or that leak. But at the moment, the figures that I've got is that she needs 81 to trigger a contest. I can't remember the percentage. Remember, the Labour Party now in Parliament, and we're talking about the House of Commons. There's an awful lot of them. So you need 81 to actually trigger a ballot. Last time I looked, and again, that was yesterday, I'm sure it's gone up since then. What we had is 30 MPs openly coming out and saying that Sir Keir should go. And we're talking about now, not some timetable, but, you know, of the level I would sign some letter to trigger a contest. In other words, what we've got is an awful long way for Catherine West, who isn't a serious candidate, of course, to trigger a contest that would allow people like Streeting to come in at some point, Angela Rayner at some point, and all the rest of it. Again, I find, again, I don't know the composition of the PLP at the moment. All I would point out, though, is that Wes Streeting is from the right. Last time I heard about Wes Streeting was in the context of Epstein and Mandelson. He was a Mandelson protege. Last time I read about Angela Rayner is she still hasn't, as I understand it, I've read, you know, contradictory reports, sorted out her tax affairs. And I even hear, you know, talk of those on the left, I presume from the Socialist Campaign Group, you don't know nowadays, but of Ed Miliband being a potential candidate. All I would say is the idea that if you're a Labour MP, any of them are going to save your seat, I just find sort of semi-amusing to the point of where I ask the question, are these people crazy or not? I mean, do we all remember Ed Red, Red Ed, excuse me, who couldn't eat a sandwich, who was so ultra, you know, ultra leftist and all the rest of it. The idea that the Telegraph, the Mail, the Sun, or for that matter, the Daily Mirror would give him an easy ride, I'm not convinced about. How long would it take before, you know, we get questions about Wes Streeting and what's the real truth about you and Mandelson and Epstein and all the rest of it? Who financed your campaign to become whatever the hell Wes Streeting became, etc., etc., etc. Look, my basic thesis is, of course, Labour won the last general election. Don't think the result was that much of a surprise to anyone, but it won it on the basis of first past the post. So you had this huge parliamentary majority based on a very slim actual popular vote. We all know the slogan, it was change. And all you need to do is look at Britain's position in the world and where the world capitalist system is at the moment. And you recognize, of course, this is a fatuous slogan. It doesn't really mean anything. And the fact of the matter is, when it comes to delivery, it's no surprise that what we have is a chancellor who cannot deliver. You know, we're not in a situation of massive surpluses, you know, huge booming economy. We're in a situation of where you can talk about growth, but only just. I mean, is it a statistical error when you're talking about 1%, 1.5%, 0.5% of growth? When you're talking about, you know, X percentage of young people not having jobs, huge proportion of young people, you know, who are coming out of universities working, I don't know, as coffee shops or bars, or way below what they're qualified for. This is the economy we're in, and we're also in an economy, again, worthwhile pointing out again, of where an awful big slice of the revenue that does come in to government coffers comes in via the city, either directly or indirectly. So, we have the statistic about the southeast of England. We have the statistics about the city of London. Now, what we're talking about here is not only, share trading, we're talking about the whole infrastructure that supports the city. So lawyers, we're talking about, the price of housing. We're talking about estate agents. We're talking about a whole infrastructure built around the city. And therefore, what we're also talking about is money at its most liquid form. So in other words, the Chancellor doesn't have the option of saying, I'm going to squeeze the rich, I'm going to squeeze the filthy rich, because the filthy rich will leave, and the filthy rich leaving will squeeze those that live off, how should I put it, the crumbs that come from all this activity in the city, all this legal activity, and all the rest of it. In other words, the case I'm making is that the Labour government, or any government in Britain, has extremely limited room for manoeuvre. We're not dealing with, the post-World War II reconstruction. We're not talking about Britain, being the global hegemon. We're talking about Britain now being, I don't know, it's an overused phrase, but a medium power, but a medium power that's radically subordinate to the United States. And under those circumstances, it doesn't surprise me that we saw not just the Tories swapping one leader after another last time, but it doesn't surprise me that we see, a Labour Chancellor scrabbling around and a Labour Prime Minister scrabbling around to deliver. My thesis is you replace, the right-wing Labour Prime Minister with a further to the right Labour Prime Minister, or if you want, a further to the left, an Angela Rayner, an Ed Miliband. Their room for manoeuvre will be exactly the same. What they can actually deliver is extremely limited. Now, of course, the advantage that reform has is you blame it all on foreigners. You blame it all on migrants. And of course, this week we had the figure, what was it, 200,000 boat people. 200,000 people have come into Britain on small boats. All you need to do, is go around any town in Britain and you're surrounded by migrants. As far as I know, that's been the case for an awful long time. I'm old enough to remember when, the pub down the road from me when I was very little, I remember the signs there, no dogs, no Irish. The migrants might not have, had dark skins, but they were Irish. I certainly remember in my area loads of migrants, but they tended to be of the rich sort. But London is a city of migrants. I don't know, when I was a kid, 50% of the population of London weren't born in London. I'm sure that's increased. So reform has an easy target. They blame outsiders. And what you see is the paradox, of course, of the Kemis and the Mahmoods also blaming outsiders. I do think, though, that reform is in a stronger position when it comes to that particular message. But what else have we seen in terms of these elections? I'll come to the Greens, I think, in a minute. I'll just mention it and then I'll develop the idea. But of course, we've also seen parliamentary elections in Wales and in Scotland. And of course, what they have the ability to do isn't to blame migrants for the problems that they will experience. What they have, of course, is and that's what they will use. It's all Westminster. It's all the government down there in London. If only we had independence, everything would be lovely. So I'm told, and I've read it, that in Scotland, for example, whatever administration came in, with the elections to the Hollywood Parliament, there has to be savage cuts in Scotland. And so, what you would expect, basically, in terms of Scotland, you've still got the SNP. The SNP will blame London and say what we want is an independence referendum. We want Indy Ref 2, and they all promise the electorate that if they're successful, everything will be wonderful. And the same will happen, obviously, with Plaid, who haven't got, there'll be a minority government, maybe. I don't know what deal will be struck in Scotland. Anyway, I'll come to that particular question in a little. I just wanted to turn to the Greens. It's interesting. I mean, I haven't really looked at the opinion polls in terms of what the expected result of the Greens were. Maybe you couldn't expect the results because we're dealing now with multi, party politics. So maybe the number crunching is just more complex. Either way, I would suggest, and this is just me guessing, I could be wrong, I would suggest that the Greens did suffer from the mainstream media and the other parties unleashing a propaganda tide against them. That's my conviction. Now, I say I could be wrong. In the Weekly Worker, we've got Carla Roberts. Maybe Carla's right, that, with I'd call it the right, but includes the Labour Party. But with this, the Greens are anti-Semitic. The thesis could be that encouraged left-wing voters to vote Green. I'm not convinced on that one. People like you and me don't tend to be influenced by the Daily Mail. We might read the Daily Mail online and say, if the Daily Mail's attacking the Greens, I'm going to vote Green. But I don't really buy that. Now, again, you have to take all of this stuff with a pinch of salt. I have read stories, and again, you have to say, well, who's feeding the stories? What agenda have they got from Greens, right? Both councillors and MPs, not necessarily named, but I can name one, Caroline Lucas, the former leader of the Green Party, saying we have to deal with our anti-Semitism problem, and Green canvassers saying that on the doorstep, voters were bringing up anti-Semitism. Well, I can give you a secret. When the Lib Dems come knocking on my door, I don't tell them to piss off. I have a discussion with them. I enjoy talking politics. So I've met my councillor, my local councillor. Anyway, I engage in a conversation, and of course they know what I'm going to raise. What about your coalition with the Tories? What about you reneging on student fees? And they have they heard it once, or have they heard it 1,000 times? They've heard it 1,000 times. Now I make it absolutely clear I'm a left winger. There's not a million, 1 in a million chance of me voting Lib Dem, but they're still prepared to talk. So I exchange my ideas with them and all the rest of it. But the point I'm making is you would expect precisely people like me, not necessarily from the left, but precisely from the centre and the right, to pick up these stories and use it against the Greens. I'm not going to vote Green, and my excuse is that you're anti-Semitic. Look at this person being arrested. Look at what this person said. Look at you, denouncing. Look at you, Zach Polanski, apologizing when it came to his remarks about Golders Green, for example. So, I don't know statistically any evidence of people who said they were going to vote Green, and as a result of this campaign actually changed their minds, as opposed to people raising it on the doorstep as an attack weapon on your canvases. Again, I'm not making an argument there. I'm just illustrating the point. But I would be surprised if that didn't have some negative effect, not least looking at the divided message from the Greens. Polanski, yes, hasn't been a pushover in the same way that Corbyn was. Nonetheless, he hasn't faced it down. And to face it down, of course, would also carry a political cost. And it would carry a political cost not only with Polanski and his leadership in relationship to mainstream politics, but also in terms of the unity of the Green Party itself. So the Green Party, yes, will have a left wing. Don't discount its realo rightist wing, Caroline Lucas and others further to the right of her. And again, remember the origins of the Green Party. The origins of the Green Party is not a left-wing party. Its origins are a right-wing, far-right party, actually, in terms of its historical antecedents. But yeah, I do think it's worthwhile raising the anti-Semitism question. Now, again, I haven't investigated it because when I do, there's the Telegraph, there's the Times. You know the story before you read it. So and so charged with spreading anti-Semitic hatred. Usually, what it turns out to be, which is why I don't bother reading the story usually anymore, is it turns out, they're not talking about anti-Semitism, they're talking about anti-Zionism. Because what's happening now in terms of the establishment, these two ideas, which are radically distinct, one is hatred of Jews as Jews, the other is an attack on a political ideology. I'm glad I'm keeping our comrade chair awake here. Either way, they're being joined together. And that's certainly something the Israeli government is doing. That's something that Zionists in Britain are doing, but also the mainstream is doing. I don't deny for a second, just like in the Labour Party under Corbyn, you can find or could find genuine anti-Semites. And I'm sure that's true in the Green Party. The tendency, I would guess, is the Green Party could even be a little bit more wacky than the Labour left. So you will be able to find some genuine anti-Semites. But my guess is that, 90%, maybe more of what we're told is anti-Semitism is actually just hostility to the Israeli government, what's going on the West Bank, and what the hell is going on in Gaza. What about the Iran war and all the rest of it? Nonetheless, I do think that had an impact on the Green Party. Okay, I'm going to come to Scotland and Wales in a minute. I couldn't resist Socialist Worker. Isn't the editor great? Wow, Thomas, you're doing a great job. Last week, we quoted it in this week's paper. Last week, they had an editorial saying, will the Green Party stay red? Which is a great story. Now, I admit that if you take Zach Polanski, I mean, if you wanted to use a phrase, that's nicked from companies, in terms of presenting their ecological credentials, greenwashing obviously comes from whitewashing. Zach Polanski, yes, has done some red washing, if you want to use a term. But the reality is that what we're talking about here has got nothing to do with socialism. I've been told that Polanski describes himself as a socialist. Well, for the life of me, if you look at the Green Party manifestos for the council, if you look at I know that wasn't Polanski, if you look at the Green Party's manifesto last time, there isn't any socialism there, except the sort of degraded socialism that, you get with Corbyn, which is socialism means niceness, which would make any party, I think the Reform can say they want to be nice to everybody, well, except foreigners. So, there's nothing to me read in any genuine sense about Polanski. But there's no doubt, though, that in comparison to the Labour Party cabinet, his policies are more radical. I've got no hesitation in saying that. But radicalism does not equal socialism. And then we get into, of course, what do you mean by socialism? There's many different sorts of socialism. Of course, what we mean by socialism is the transition to communism. There's not a trace even of, classic, right-wing social democracy of the 1950s sort with the Greens under Polanski. And what I mean by that is some idea that the right wing of social democracy had that through Labour governments, you would arrive at a socialist society. Right? You don't have that with the Greens. Okay, so anyway, Socialist Worker says, will the Greens stay red? Well, to me, they ain't red. That says something about the Socialist Workers' Party actually excusing the signal that we detect because it didn't come out openly and say vote Green. But I think that was their call on the 7th, on Thursday. So they're sort of making an excuse that the Greens are really red. They might not stay red, but this is why we voted. But we're not saying that we called. So it's a shamefaced sort of politics. We also have this week, again, I've already made my my guess, for what it's worth, clear here, if you can make a guess clear. What we have in Socialist Worker this week is Starmer's last stand. Maybe that applied to 3 weeks ago, his last stand. I'm skeptical. I am convinced that if Starmer leads the Labour Party into the next general election and the Labour Party doesn't win a majority, he'll fall on his sword. That to me is just standard bourgeois politics nowadays. He wouldn't do a Harold Wilson. He wouldn't do a Ramsay MacDonald. He would fall on his sword, and you'll get whoever you get, depending on how many Labour MPs are left standing. But just my last comment on Socialist Worker, just to confirm what we know about the comrades, they're defining the problem with the Greens is electoralism, right? So it's electoralism, which means thinking that elections are important. Well, I think elections are important. As far as I know, Lenin and the Bolsheviks thought elections were important. They not only stood in Tsarist elections, right, which were grossly unfair. No one could pretend that every vote was equal. They weren't. Some people had more important votes than others. The richer you were, the more noble you were, the more your vote counted in terms of electing representatives. But they also stood, didn't they, in Soviet elections. And indeed, the Bolsheviks made their bid for power, state power, on the basis of their expected win in the Congress of Soviets. So it wasn't even the vote, but they'd won delegates. That was important for Lenin and the Bolsheviks. And they also went on, we can get a discussion, maybe not. They also stood for the Constituent Assembly before they closed it down. So the Bolsheviks clearly took elections seriously. And indeed, if we look at the Third International, I mean, it made standing in elections an obligation for parties that were affiliating to it. But according to our comrades, electoralism is the idea that change comes through parliament and elections. Now, if you're talking, in terms of Labourism, I would agree. because what they're talking about isn't simply Parliament in terms of the House of Commons. What they're talking about, right, is the House of Lords, the monarchy, the whole state apparatus. So they're talking about MI5, the police, the existing judiciary. We're not. We would say that if we were in a position of where we won 60% of the vote, we would abolish the House of Lords. We would sack the monarchy. We would sack the judges. We would disperse MI5. But we would defend that majority, or even an expected majority, not with the workers' militia that the SWP has after the revolution, which is generous, isn't it? So when you have after the revolution, whatever that is, you then form a workers' militia. No, comrades, before you need a workers' militia before the revolution in order to make the revolution. It's also why we put forward the idea of a popular militia. We aim to split the popular militia with the rank and file on one side, our side, and any officers who don't come our way, well, you arrest them, and you certainly don't obey their orders. Anyway, let's move on. I've already mentioned the Tories. I do find the silence around Kemi Badenoch slightly strange, but there you are. But I did want to turn next. Just a brief one before Scotland and Wales. I did want to turn to reform and the idea, which I think is sort of understandable, but I think mistaken. And that is, now we've got reform in not only with so many councillors, but also in charge of so many councils. And that includes in London, for example, they will expose themselves. They'll run things so badly. Well, they will run things so badly. Of course they will, like every other council. The money isn't there. You can administer cuts. You can go in for some symbolism. So maybe they'll fly the Union Jack everywhere. I don't know. But it will be at that level, maybe they'll refuse to house asylum seekers or something along those lines. And then we get into a dispute between the government and the local council, and the courts will decide that the government has the right to house asylum seekers. Whatever, you might get that. But my argument would be, I think that comrades who think that way are clutching at straws. That almost all you need to do is put in reform, it exposes itself, and then voters get demoralized and go somewhere else. In other words, reform is, it becomes a busted flush. Now, you could go back to Lenin and say that's what he was aiming to do with the Labour Party, but I would argue you're making a fundamental mistake. Lenin's approach, the approach of the CPGB, back in the early 20s, before we had any experience of a Labour government, was, yes, to put the Labour Party into government, to expose it. But what you had is a Communist Party. And this wasn't a negative demoralization exposure. Oh, look, the Labour Party, has to cut the dole, or, it can't magic up jobs. Well, what a surprise. It has to keep in with budgetary limits, or it wants to go back to the gold standard, blah, blah, blah. That exposes it. People don't automatically then come to the Communist Party, let alone in the absence of a Communist Party. So I think that this is a profound illusion, that all you need to do is put some right-wing party, or for that matter, centrist party or Green, in to local council or national government. It exposes itself. Yes, people get demoralized. Where is the world going at the moment? At the moment, with exceptions like Hungary, but in general, it's going to the right, to the right, to the right. And, if you look at reform, as I've already made the argument that they've got a ready blame. Why can't we do anything in the council? Well, the government doesn't give us any powers, which would be a truth, right? Doesn't give us any money, which is also the truth. And we got all these foreigners coming over here illegally on small boats, which will my guess is, in spite of agreements with France, believe it or not, I think that will continue. Why? Because people are desperate to get out of where they were born and to come somewhere. I wouldn't say it's decent, but compared with where they're coming from, it's got prospects. That push will continue. So I think that is a mistake. I don't think reform will expose itself in the council chamber. I mean, it will on some level, but I don't think then you're going to get voters going, oh, we're going to return to our simple ways of voting Labour or whatever the hell. I think that things are in flux, and in general, they're moving to the right. Just look at the Tory party, how far to the right, far right party that's moved further to the right. I don't see any reason why reform cannot continue on that journey. Okay, so that's the argument on that one. Now, finally, as promised, Scotland and Wales, not regional assemblies, as I think Paul Damarty described them as, but nonetheless, sort of that's right. Because I've been told, before a certain, was it Supreme Court judgment, that Scotland and Wales had the right to self-determination. All our stuff about federal republic and the right to, Scotland and Wales to self-determination, that's all a load of cooey, because all you need to do is vote SNP, either in Westminster or in Holyrood. Well, we've now been told, court judgment, Scotland doesn't have the right to self-determination. It's the government in Westminster that can decide whether you have a referendum or not, let alone whether the referendum is binding, whether it actually has any legal standing, i.e. you say, of course it doesn't have any legal standing, but we're going to recognize it. We'll enact legislation that conforms with that referendum. So what we have, and that's been pointed out by a whole number of observers, and I think this is sort of not quite taking us to the edge, but it does highlight the national question in Britain, because what we have is in Northern Ireland, First Minister Sinn Féin. What we have in Scotland almost certainly is going to be SNP, and my guess is surely Plaid Cymru in Cardiff. So we're going to have heads of devolved government in every part of the United Kingdom, bar England, headed by people who don't want to be in the United Kingdom. I think that's what you call interesting politics. And what's the left answer to this? Well, I've already quoted one answer is that they have the right to self-determination. I think life has told you, if you listen, that isn't the case. Scotland doesn't have the right. It is beholden to Westminster. What's the other left reaction? Twofold. That's my general observation. One, trail independence. Trail it either on the basis that the SWP does it, and that is anything that's bad for British imperialism must be good for the working class. Well, to me, you might as well wish, probably, look at COVID. That was bad for British imperialism, as far as I know. As far as I know, it was also bad for us. The idea that the working class would be strengthened by the breakup of the historically united labour movement and working class movement in Britain, I think is a profound mistake. Remember, when it came to Ireland, the argument was that by championing the right of Ireland to separate from the United Kingdom, that would actually unite workers in Britain, right? And that was key. That was the argument, right? Certainly, I would make the argument that the working class movement in England ought to champion the right of Scotland and Wales. Ireland we can leave aside as a more complex issue. But it ought to champion the right of the parliaments in Edinburgh and in Cardiff to determine their own future. That ought to be a right that is with them. On the other hand, we also ought to be in a position as people in England, as I am, and that is saying, don't do it. Remain with us. We are for democracy. We're fighting for socialism. We're in a stronger position if we fight together. And indeed, that's why we raise, we think as an absolute programmatic necessity, our unity in Britain with the working class movement in Europe. So you do get that SWP argument, which I think is bogus, and I think it's tailist. But you also then get a left that says Scotland would be better off. It would be better off if it broke from England, because England is right wing. Look at Reform. It used to be, look at the Tories. We would be better off. Well, be careful, comrades. Reform isn't that far behind either in Scotland or Wales. I know you all hate them, quite rightly, but be aware of that. And also don't have any illusions in how deep the SNP's left rhetoric, or Plaid Cymru's left rhetoric is, or the Greens' left rhetoric is. It's quite conceivable that you could see a bolting together of these parties against the working class, using the English as their problem. But my argument certainly would be that if, and it's a very big if, that you had an independent Scotland, it would resemble something along the lines of 1920s, 1930s Ireland, which people don't really examine, except to note that Ireland, I think, lost people every single year since the potato famine until recently, and maybe that's continued. People left the country, came to London, went to Boston, they got out. And that would be my fear in Scotland, that Scotland, instead of enjoying wonderful prosperity, was actually plunged into poverty, and Scottish people just vote with their feet and leave Scotland and go south or go anywhere, but not stay in Scotland. I don't believe, certainly when it comes to the socialist promise, that can be treated seriously. The idea of Tommy Sheridan, Alan McCombs, the SSP, and all the rest of them, that what you need to do in Scotland is somehow emulate Cuba, and everything will be wonderful. To quote the joint book by Sheridan and McCombs, Scotland has wonderful natural resources, a wonderfully long coastline. It's got oil. It's got everything we need for socialism. That's just nonsense. It would be blockaded if it was any genuine attempt at a left-wing government. It would be lent on. It would be snuffed out, potentially, violently. So I do think that we need to get real here. And I'll finish with simply saying that I do think that our programmatic perspective has been, what's the word, made all the more relevant given these particular results in Scotland and Wales. I'll finish with that, Stone. Thank you.
Okay, comrades, it's discussion time. Thanks, Jack. If you want to speak, you have to raise your hand. And I can see that already happening. If you're an attendee and you want to speak, you have to become a panelist. So ask to be a panelist in the chat, and the host will transfer you. So first of all, we've got Tobias. Toby, have a go.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Oh, bugger. Can you hear?
Yep. Yep.
Oh, God, it's not actually Toby, it's me. I'm Toby's partner. My name's Jane, and
Jane. Yep.
I'm a member of the Green Party. I want to take up a couple of the points that Jack made about our approach to socialism. I belong to a tendency called Green Left, which is a sort of eco-socialist tendency within the Green Party. Now, I would acknowledge that the origins in the Ecology Party were not socialist, were not probably not even particularly left-wing. They were centrist. The point is that in Green Left and intended the Green Party, we believe that campaigning for the environment includes campaigning for human rights and all the things that socialists campaign for. And years ago, there was a discussion on television, and Caroline Lucas was confronted by some right-wing I think he's called David Starkey, something like that. And he said that, I mean, you're basically just socialist with a green front. And she said, yes, we're very proud of our socialist heritage. And then some other right wing pundit or whatever enemy said, the trouble with you lot is you're just watermelons. You're green on the outside and red on the inside. Well, we've accepted that actually as a compliment, and we actually have a journal, an online journal called The Watermelon. So I just wanted to point out that there is a very strong socialist tendency within the Green Party, but I will admit that the origins were not in socialism, were not red, but someone, may have been Derek Wall, actually coined the slogan, you have to be green to be red, and you have to be red to be green. So I thought I'd put that out for what it's worth, okay?
Thank you. I've got John Ryan, but also Tam Byrne is in the attendees at the moment.
I was going to try and get in, but
needs to transfer. So John Ryan, go ahead.
No good now because you've.
Okay. Yeah, hi. Just on the Celtic fringe, if you like. I'm not accusing anyone here of it, but I think it's something for some elements of the left, because we talk about talking to new people who haven't been involved in politics before, and they're given some phrases and some new definitions that they're coming across. And like, it would be a mistake if I think some of those elements took down, say, for the instance, the word reactionary, and say applied that to Plaid Cymru or the SNP. I mean, as two parties, they're obviously not reactionary. I mean, we all know nationalism is a sort of cul-de-sac. We know that it otherwise, ultimately restricts and holds up workers and so forth. We know that. But I think a lot of it has to do with regions, if you like, moving forward in a small way at different rates. And sometimes after that, the different neighbours sort of come back together, as it were, for the next phase of development in politics or whatever. I mean, for instance, when Barbados pulled out of the Commonwealth, that didn't make them mad, crazy nationalists, but it was a movement that got them somewhere where they needed to be at this time. And it's something similar, I mean, if a Belgian waves the Belgian flag, it doesn't really harm you or harm me. And the same way, if a Welsh person, if she waves her flag, it doesn't do you any harm or me any harm. So it's a question of by England, if you like, going through its current phase, it's inevitable that Wales and Scotland are going to be doing something different for now. But obviously, 5-10 years down the line, you'll see changes in these phases again. So I think maybe, people are overreacting to it. That's all. Thanks.
Tam, and then John Smithy.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a small point on the press reaction to Starmer and all that. That a paper that, it's a right-wing rag in a way, but a bit more authoritative. The Financial Times, they had a news article. I was surprised it came out with this statement. It said that bond markets are worried that Starmer and Rachel Reeves going and being replaced by a more left-wing government. So I just thought that's how capitalism is looking on the potential dangers of what's going on in the Labour Party. But it did surprise me because I've not seen any signs it was moving to the left particularly. I don't think they could have been particularly meaning Andy Burnham, but who knows? And just a small bit on Scotland, yeah, that there is this recognised £5 billion black hole that is going to have to be dealt with, it wasn't getting discussed in the election at all, but the SNP, you know, have been perfectly happy to. They don't. It's not necessarily about blaming the English, blaming Westminster. They put the problem into the local councils and get them to deal with it, even when often they're like with Glasgow, it is an SNP council. But that is apparently what's going to be faced very soon. It could be so much bigger. There was an article I saw with there's this businessman, authoritative and businessman in Scotland, Sir Tom Hunter. The headline of his article was how is Scotland going to deal with the £5 billion black hole and stop it becoming a 50 billion black hole? And one of the biggest ways he put forward is to be reopening the North Sea, oil and gas. And Stephen Flynn, was previously the head of the SNP at Westminster. I don't know quite how it's all worked, but he is now an MSP. Don't know if he's planning working it that he's going to be both at once, but he is now a MSP for Aberdeen, and he has said that Aberdeen and the oil and gas industry would have no better friend than the SNP government. So that's looking very likely. I would imagine that, you know, this with Rosebank and the other one, these fields getting reinvigorated is looking likely. You know, it would suit the Labour Party as well in power that they've only said no, not new licenses, but Miliband has talked about going back on it. But this looks a virtual certainty probably now that that's what it's going to entail. So I think that was it. There was maybe one more thing, but I'll leave it there because I can't quite remember what the other thing was.
Yeah, thanks, Tam. You can come back.
Yeah.
John Smithy now. Hello, John.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're on.
The thing is, these local elections and elections in Scotland and in Wales, they're like a midterm election in America now. Local councils have very little powers and room for manoeuvre. 85% of council budgets are spent on social services, special education needs, potholes and bin collections. Like the reform councils, I've found out there's not much more to cut back on. As I've said for several times on this forum over the years, my biggest thing that I've concluded is that the biggest thing in politics is not whether to nationalise the banks or the 150 monopolies as Milton or their subsequent followers want, but it's whether to build Cairnsleyses. Where I live in Fenland District Council have not built a single Cairnsley's for 30 years. I think one of the things about the reason why the Greens have won 4 councils in London, including Hackney, Lewisham, Lambeth and Camden, is that young couples who normally 30, 40 years ago would be able to afford to buy or rent a house big enough to build a family can't do that. And that's why the Greens, with their policy of rent controls and building Cairnsleyses, have been so popular. One of the things I've read about London, and it applies to the big cities as well, is that because the increase in population of Greater London, you need to build 100,000 new houses a year. And in 2025, only 6,500 were built, and they were all private houses. Regarding the right-wing MPs, there's 200 of them who are handpicked by Mandelson. They don't want to be an MP for one parliament. They want to be an MP for 20 or 25 years and have a career. And my own view is the only way that Labour can, the right wing and the soft left can recover is that they get Andy Burnham in as the leader, but he hasn't a seat. And because of the collapse in the Labour vote, even if he did win one of the 3 seats that are on offer in Greater Manchester, he could lose the election. Andy Burnham has said that he wants to spend £40 billion building Cairnsleyses, and he has said that building Cairnsleyses with the so-called right to buy is like filling up a bath with the plug out. The final thing I'd like to say is to ask Jack, does he see the possibility of Reform being the biggest party in the next general election, with the support of the Tory party, including the Tory parties having ministers? Or is this a temporary blip because of the people having a protest vote against Starmer? Because I gather up north, what's happened is a lot of Labour voters have gone to the Greens and they've let Reform through the middle. And that's what's happened in the red wall seats. Perhaps Jack could comment. Thank you.
Thanks, John. There's no hands up as far as I can see. There's Jack. Carry on, Jack. Yeah.
Yeah, just demuting myself. Thanks, John. Yeah, I thought I'd come in now anyway. So obviously I'm not trying to finish anything at all. So just coming in midway. So I'm going to go back and just comment on what Jane said. I understand that Toby was eager to get in as well. So I don't know, Toby, if you wanted to come in after me, you're very welcome.
Ant as well, yeah.
Yeah, sure, Ant. Well, Ant, no war but the class war. Okay. Okay. Jane, just historically, I think you're being, how should I put it, generous with the truth about ecology and what was it before that? The People Party. In all honesty, I can only describe the origins of today's Green Party in England and Wales as far right. They were feudal. They wanted to introduce feudalism. You've quoted, what's his name? Anyway, I can't remember the name of the Scruton, wasn't it? Roger Scruton. His sort of ideas, his ideal, was some sort of feudalism anyway. And we're not talking about William Morris, or we're talking about the poor man at his gate and the rich man in his castle. That's the natural estate of human affairs. Anyway, they were far right. The question I have, you see, I try to illustrate it, Jane. It all depends. I mean, you could use the word socialism. I'm not going to stop you. I'm really just trying to describe, socialism as meaning something a bit beyond let's be nice to each other. If Caroline Lucas says she's a socialist under being interviewed by some far right person, and she said, I'm a socialist, in all honesty, what she means by it is she doesn't want to be nasty to people. She wants people to have, an even break or something like that. It's just to me that then guts the word socialism of its historic content. And that's why I also try to illustrate my argument, even talking about right-wing social democracy. I know Gateskill wanted to dump Clause 4 on the basis, well, we're never going to implement it. But remember, there were those on the right wing of social democracy promoted by the CIA that did hold up the prospect of going towards socialism as defined by Clause 4. Now, I would call that bureaucratic socialism or labor-right socialism. Okay, but if one wants to reduce the word socialism to the level of being nice to people, then Caroline Lucas is a socialist, and so Zach Belansky. But then my argument is, so is Ed Davey, and 90% of the political establishment. It's just meaningless to me. They are not a socialist party in the way that it's legitimate for the SWP to describe it. They are not read in any sense that Marxists would recognize. And that's why, in the Weekly Worker, for want of something better, we've used the word red washing in the same way that you and me would describe ICI or whatever the company's called nowadays when they say that, or the North Sea oil industry is being mentioned. That's really good for the environment. We would describe that as greenwashing. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's, to use an Anglo-Saxon term, it's bollocks. So that's what I'm describing. You have got people on the left of the Green Party. I've met Derek Wall. I've read some of his stuff. I don't know you, Jane, other than you're in Italy and you're with Toby, and I'm sure you're a sincere socialist. Fair enough. All I know with Zach is he comes from the Liberal Democrats, and I would describe him myself, on the evidence that I have, still as fundamentally a liberal. He doesn't want NATO, but he still wants a European capitalist defense system. He wants a nicer, fairer capitalism that would benefit medium-sized and small capital. And as Marx showed against Proudhon, that's an illusion. You still have wage slavery. I think any genuine socialist that I want to give the name socialism to must be out to abolish the exploitation and slave position of the working class. Otherwise, you're just talking about a different form of capitalism, usually a delusional form of capitalism. So that's really my argument. So, if you want to describe him as socialist, fair enough. But I would say, if I was, having a debate with, I would just say you're not a socialist. You're not a socialist in any meaningful sense that I understand the word socialism, and the word socialism has been used historically. That would be my argument. He's not a utopian socialist. He's not even a bourgeois socialist. Anyway, that's my argument there. So I know about the left wing. In terms of what John Ryan, in terms of what you were saying, John, look, to me, if we want to go towards socialism, we need powerful working classes, and we need powerful working classes that can take hold of powerful states. So when the left, when the communists looked at what has happened in Eastern Europe, we used the term balkanization. And that wasn't meant in a positive sense, that what we want is lots of little states, because that disempowers the working class. It threw the working class back in Eastern Europe. It made it incapable of doing anything in terms of world politics. So, yeah, you know, you can have the New Deal movement in Grenada, and then the Americans send some Marines. Okay, great. And that's really my argument about socialism, in inverted commas, in Britain, let alone in Scotland. This isn't something that we are indifferent to. When we have little states in Europe, Belgium, as my understanding, is a creation of Britain. This isn't Belgium self-determination at work. This is the bigger imperialist powers dividing up Europe in the way that they want, in the same way that Britain had an interest, I'm guessing, at the continued division of Germany. We have an interest in the unity of Germany. We have an interest in the unity of Italy, because we can then do something. You know, if you've got a united Germany under us, under Marx, Engels, Liebknecht, and all the rest of it, we can do something serious. We can withstand, outside imperialist intervention. If all you've got is, I don't know, I can't think of a German state, Baden-Baden, just making it up, or whatever. This is Engels' argument. This is Marx's argument. Then you can do nothing. We're impotent with this fragmentation of Germany, or we simply get bullied by the Prussia or the Austria. Small states is not something we champion. So I'm in favor of championing for the working class movement in Britain, championing Ireland's right to separate as the basis of creating the unity. But I'm not in favor of, what we have first of all is separate the English and the Scottish, and that will somehow be a step forward for our later unity. At the moment, I think that would be a retrogressive step. That's my assessment anyway. In the same way that we took the approach on Europe, we were against Brexit. That didn't mean we fell for the Brexit referendum con. Right? From our point of view, it was a complete con. We weren't going to save David Cameron. We thought that if David Cameron won his referendum, that wouldn't do away with, well, I was about to say reform. It was called UKIP then, wasn't it? The right will continue. Notice, there you are, Nigel Farage, UKIP got its way, Britain isn't in the EU, and everything's wonderful, isn't it? The NHS has got that 350 million extra. Well, not last time I visited at a hospital, not last time I tried to go and visit a GP. It was a lie. It is a lie. And I would apply that to Scotland. The idea that Scotland becomes independent, living standards go up, council houses are built. These are lies that they're telling us. So I'm not convinced. And again, just in terms of language, look, I come from a hard tradition, and I've just been writing articles, as you know, on the general strike. And one little thing I got in my head is Trotsky's description. I don't think it would be controversial. I'm sure you can find it in Stalin. I've just been rereading my Stalin from 1926. And Trotsky, just as off the cuff, describes Ramsay MacDonald and Walter Citrine as counter-revolutionaries. And he's saying that the left wing of the Labour Party is tied to counter-revolution. That's the truth. So anyway, that's really my argument about how we describe people politically. Okay. Tam. Look, if there's going to be an SNP government, who are they going to rely on? My guess is it's going to be the Greens. The Greens have two directly elected MSPs, and they also got MSPs on the list system. good idea, Swinney. I've got this really good idea. The way we overcome our 5 billion budget deficit is open up the North Sea. What happens then to your green coalition partners? They go, oh, that's a really good idea. Look, what you've got is this very strange. I mean, I don't want to accuse anyone of having stocks and shares and being out for a fast killing on the stock market, but I suspect that's what's going on. We've got this campaign, open up the North Sea. I can understand the appeal if you're living in Aberdeen, you're looking back to the boom days. Here you are, you can have boom days again. But the idea that this is the salvation for Scotland, I don't buy it. We can go into world prices, and world prices at the moment are very high. You can't just switch on the North Sea. You have to develop it. You have to spend a lot of money over a long period of time. Meanwhile, suddenly peace breaks out in the Middle East. Peace breaks out between NATO, US and Russia, and the price of oil plummets. I don't know, but North Sea is marginal, right? It's not cheap oil, it's marginal oil. You could extract oil from the Arctic easily, except it will cost you $180 a barrel. So it's not economic even now. My understanding is, I haven't looked it up for a long time, my understanding is you can do that in Saudi Arabia for $2 a barrel, right? So that's the sort of different economics that we're dealing with. So I think these people are liars. They're not able. With one leap, all we need to do is develop the North Sea. That solves Scotland's financial problem. It's just nonsense. It's nonsense on stilts. Okay, John Smithy. We're in favour of building council houses. I was brought up in a council house. It was great. We had all sorts of classes. We didn't have any unemployed because there weren't any unemployed in those days. But we had ordinary working class people, and we had people you'd call now middle class, and they were middle class. I'm not just using the word in that. They were genuine middle class people, right? We all got on. Kids went to the same school. We all played together. It was great. We didn't live in we lived in a rabbit hutch, but it was a sort of communal thing, and it worked. Okay, I'm in favour of council houses that are maintained, that aren't let to go to slumville, right? So we're in favour of. Why were council houses built in 45 onwards? It was called the power of the working class, not just in Britain, but globally. It was considered a threat, right? I'm not going to include the Soviet Union as socialist or anything like that, but ideologically it exerted a socialist challenge, if you wanted, to the bourgeoisie. So although the Tories ran it down, my memory is, maybe it's just I've inherited it, wasn't my memory with the Tory government of 51, it committed itself to building, was it 250,000 council houses? I can't remember the figure, but it was a shed load of council houses. It didn't abandon it made them worse. It lowered standards, size of rooms and all the rest of it. But anyway, that's the pressure of the working class, both domestically and also internationally. So I don't see that at the moment. So merely Andy Burnham coming along, what would you get? And this is the argument. Tam sort of raised it, tangentially, because he said that the bond markets, i.e. investors, that's what we mean, because bond markets might think on some level, they might have some sort of collective consciousness as capital. But nonetheless, what he means is investors would take their money out of Britain, not just in terms of bond markets, but out of the city, if they saw anything left. And my argument is that Britain no longer has a coal industry, no longer has a steel industry, no longer has a car industry. Britain increasingly relies precisely on the city and on finance capital right? Finance capital is extremely fluid. So precisely, anyone who comes in and saying, we are going to tax the rich, I've already made the argument, they leave and they take their capital with them. And that means, in terms of the tax take, the revenue that British governments rely on, is reduced. And therefore, far from having swashloads of money to spend on council houses, an Andy Burnham government is dealing with cuts. That's my argument, right? And that's true in Scotland, that's true in Wales, that's true with a Green government, that's true with any government. That would be true with us. If we came to power as a working class in Britain, does anyone think you have got a magic wand? You must be in with Europe. You must be going for the world revolution. You must be making an appeal to bring the American working class on side. You must be reaching out to China, to India, to Africa. So we don't believe, in some little part of the world, i.e. Britain, being able to deliver, our full program. We'll fight for our full program, but that precisely means internationalism, not falling back on our national resources. Okay, you asked the question. I did have it in my first notes. I didn't cover it. Who knows about the next general election? But, if I was a betting person, and I'm not really, but I don't mind an occasional political bet when on a certainty, I'll definitely go for a fiver with you. Look, I don't know. I simply don't know. The result could be anything. I wouldn't discount Starmer, but I think you're right. You're quite right that what we've got in reform, I listened to Nigel Farage saying, we used to believe in left and right, and that's gone. Well, to some extent, there's a truth there. But what's really happened is things have moved to the right. That's really what's happened. The Labour Party's moved to the right, the left has moved to the right, and the right has moved to the right. And, the natural coalition partners of reform is either a con-reform coalition government or a reform con government. They're natural for each other, aren't they? But we don't know. We don't know what the arithmetic is. But all I would say, as things stand at the moment, and I am a politician and I want to change things. Therefore, I'm not looking at things in a passive way. I want to get the left together. That's our project, to start doing something serious so we can shift things to the left. And we're not going to do that, in my view, in an incremental way. If we move the Green Party a little bit to the left, no, we need a Communist Party. And we need a Communist Party that's internationalist, that can reach out to Europe, reach out to America, and then say to the capitalists, we want reforms. And then they look at us and they treat us seriously. And then they start giving, right? Not because of their generosity, but because of their fear. They have got to fear us. And far from such reforms weakening us, they strengthen us. That's the argument. So we want substantial reforms. We think we can get substantial reforms, but that has to be on the basis of the working class going towards taking power, not just in Little Britain, but globally. That's it, Stan. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. Well, I've got Ant next, and then we've got Jane and Tam coming around for a second go. Ant, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I must admit, Jack has stolen my thunder. So much of what I was going to say, Jack said it. So he'll be either very happy or very sad to hear that I agreed with a lot of what he was saying. I'll let him decide on that one. Obviously there were certain elements of what he was saying that I've disagreed with in the past, and I'm going to continue to disagree with. Talk about the independence of Ireland, Scotland, or anywhere in the world. I think that's misguided. There is no national independence possible. No nation can stand outside of the imperialist nexus. I thought, what he just concluded with was very interesting. Every time that he's spoken in terms of, bringing the left together, I've always sort of like inwardly cringed or groaned or whatever. But then he immediately followed that up with, we need a communist party. And I'm going to say that the two concepts are not quite the same if you think about it. So, in my mind, bringing the left together, it involves all the existing little, left capitalist outfits, or, the alloys of revolution and left capitalism. Building a communist party, to me, does not really include all those little left-wing outfits. I think that they're two very, very different concepts. However, this is what I was going to say. I'm going to freely accept that a lot of what I'm saying is only echoing what Jack said previously. But hopefully some of it will be different. I was going to say that nobody owns the definition of words. So when some claim to be socialist, we have to ask, what does that mean? So, are we talking about, what Marxists talk about, the revolutionary abolition of capitalism, or are we talking about, simply talking about, modifications within capitalism? And I think for too many people who like to call themselves socialists, socialism is nothing more than, a deviation from a capitalist model whereby fat, cigar smoking, top hat wearing capitalists lord it over their half-starved, flat cap wearing workers, knocking out 16-hour shifts 6 days a week for tuppence halfpenny. So when the capitalist state heads off the revolutionary threat with welfare, NHS, or a whole host of measures, universal benefit possibly in the future, measures which they claim create a healthy, trained workforce and the like. Too many are content to see this as the struggle for socialism. So the struggle over the length of the chain or the size of the cage. But this is not really socialism for Marxists, or for sure it's not the destination of socialism. So what we may say is that this is the class struggle. So that the fight over the sale of labour power, negotiating the share earmarked for the classes involved. But it's not socialism, as we understand it. So socialism for Marxists is not a simple amendment of capitalism. It's a different mode of production. So a different mode of production which can only be initiated, started, can only be started by the smashing of the capitalist state and the rule of the working class through its own organs. Then, and only then, can we talk about a process which leads to socialism. So only when this process is extended to the major metropoles, when the working class is in power on the international scale, can we think in terms of creating socialism. And meanwhile, under this system, on this side of the revolution, the only direction is worse for the working class. So when a bunch of parties claim socialism, just like the lady who talked about the Greens, we need to be very wary. And as Marxists, we've got to reject their idea of socialism. What we have here in the UK and everywhere, globally, is a ruling class dictatorship, however it's veiled. So no matter what the story that is told, the reality is always going to be a ruling class dictatorship wherever capitalism exists. So all the rights and democracy on offer are all dependent on the working class bowing their head and accepting wage slavery. So if the class actually raises its head, the whole edifice of rights and democracy collapses. So the democracy on offer is meaningless and serves to deceive the working class, to keep us tied to the structures of capitalism, to wage slavery. So Jack said something, almost towards the end. We need to take hold of powerful states. We need to smash them, not take hold of them. We need to smash them and rule through our own organs, our own structure of power. The workers' councils again. And that's how a revolutionary party gains decisive influence, through the organs the working class creates, not through capitalist elections, terrain on which we've got no chance of competing. Okay, thank you very much. That's it. As I said, you know, very, very repetitive of what Jack said, I think. But hopefully I gave it some original twists. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. A small comment from me, and balance of forces, you know, in the class struggle, it's like a war. And the outcome at any point depends on the balance of forces, and we can make gains as well as losses. I think there's food for thought.
True.
Jane, and then Tam, and then John Smithy. Jane, please.
It's actually Toby this time.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it?
Toby.
Yeah, it is me this time. So I'm not necessarily going to endorse everything that Jane has said, but I mean, I think the gains of the Green Party in London, and I wish people would get it right about which councils they've got control of, which are Lewisham, Hackney, Waltham Forest, are the ones where they've got a majority. And I think they're the largest party in Lambeth. They're certainly not in control of Camden, nowhere near. Okay. I think the reason they've done as well as they have is, at least in part, because they are perceived as the only serious left alternative to Starmer's Labour Party. Look, 800,000 people were interested in your party at the start, and we've seen what's happened. They haven't stood candidates under their own name, which is pathetic. And the independents, as far as I understand from bits and pieces I saw on Facebook, the independents that was supported by your party were getting about 1%, 2%, that sort of thing. Look, so what has happened is the people who would have come to your party had it been a viable outfit. I mean, okay, I never thought it'd be a revolutionary socialist outfit, but I think that under Zara Sultana, if she'd won, that it would have been a left social democratic thing, and that it would have got more votes, you know, and got it would have got votes in areas where the Greens in London got votes. I mean, I honestly don't think, if you take Lewisham, for example, which is the borough, because I worked there for 23 years, I know best, and I just stood 5 times for Lewisham Council under various labels, not Labour or Green, but anyway, that the fact that they got a majority in the borough as a whole, and not just at the few bits near Goldsmiths College, where they'd got seats before, is an indication that they were winning people on the basis of being perceived as to the left of the Labour Party, through things like what John Smithy was saying about rent control and about building council houses, stuff like that. So I think they, you know, in the absence of anything looking serious to the voters other than the Greens, that people who had previously voted Labour turned to the Greens. They also probably got votes on the basis of being consistently anti-racist, whilst the Labour Party has tailed reform in all the stuff about stop the boats and smash the gangs and all that stuff, right? So basically, if you're from an Afro-Caribbean or Asian background, when I say Asian, I obviously don't necessarily mean the Indians, because they're somewhat more wealthy there, but we're talking about the Pakistani and Bangladeshi people in terms of their origins, not that they just come here, that they are likely not to look to reform for obvious reasons. And if they're looking for an alternative to the Labour Party, they will turn to the Greens. As we saw also in that by-election in the Greater Manchester area. So I think that you know, your party might have got somewhere had Corbyn and Carrie Murphy not killed it, but instead you have the Greens moving into that space. That's one thing I'd say. Another thing I'd like to say is about Wales. Okay, okay, I haven't lived there all the time since I was about 10, but I was born there and I do know something about the country. Look, I think the vote for the Nats for Plaid this time was not because everyone voting for them had suddenly been converted to Welsh nationalism in the full sense, or even to speaking the Welsh language or anything like that, but because they were seen as the only viable alternative, particularly given this, a completely distorted form of PR in Wales that had multi-party seats, but only of 6 members each, and not on STV like I think the Irish system, Southern Irish system has, but it was only possible to keep reform out as far as you could by voting for the Plaid. Also, the Plaid, I think, predominantly are more of a left party than the SNP. And therefore, look, I think insofar as there is a tradition in Wales connected with the Labour movement, that a lot of these people were fed up with Starmer and thought he was useless, and but didn't want reform, so they voted for the Plaid. But I don't think that means that they're intrinsically, ideologically converted to all the ideas of Welsh nationalism, which has not been as strong as Scottish nationalism in previous elections at all. Okay, so that's Wales. Also, coming back to Lewisham, I know it's trivial maybe, but it was a particularly corrupt Labour council and a particularly enthusiastic austerity mongering cutting council. So I think there was a particular reason why people would turn against Lewisham Council in a way that they wouldn't turn against councils elsewhere, like Hammersmith and Fulham, whatever stand we think of Hammersmith and Fulham, given the way they treated him. But I mean, they have done things that have been minor gains for working people compared with the previous Tory administration, right? So that they stay there. Whilst something like Lewisham, it suddenly explodes. But I think there was a long history behind it of people, thinking it was an awful council, which it was. Okay. I'll leave it at that. I'm sure that Ant will think I'm a hopeless right wing to some extent. Jack will, but not to the same extent. Because I suppose I still believe in what Mike McNair the other week called leading people by the nose to socialism, which I call the transitional method. You start with where they are, obviously not with their race, not with racism, but I mean with economics issues and social issues that you can then use to push them further left. Okay, I'm not not the full communist program. Okay, it's a bit cynical, but that's me. Okay, so I've always been like that. Okay, leave it at that. Bye.
Thank you, Toby, and that gives me the chance to speak up to the Hammersmith and Fulham. There's no other parties, just Labour and Tory now. Tories gained 2 seats, they've now got 12, and Labour's got 38. And the challengers, there were some Greens and there was some Reform and what have you, and so they all got beaten out. And so there you are. It's an example of what some of the councils say, maybe lots of them say, we're doing more with less, So they managed to get some popular policies established, including free school meals and stuff. So Labour's not all bad, you see, locally. Hammersmith and Fulham, hurrah! Tam, and then John, and then Mike.
Okay. In regards to the ongoing Scottish government, it's already been said on both sides, the SNP and Greens, that there won't be a formal pact like previously. And also the success of the Lib Dems, that was surprising a bit, that the SNP have already said that they would work with them. So they're not dependent on the Greens. And especially on the situation with the North Sea, because they would have the support of every other party. The Tories, the Labour. Rachel Reeves said a year ago that the Rosebank and Jackdaw fields, Rosebank's oil, Jackdaw's gas, will be, it's not reopening. These are new fields. Rosebank is Norwegian and Jackdaw is Shell. That these will be functioning for decades to come. So she said that a year ago. At the beginning of March, SNP said that they were for these fields. So it's basically a done deal already that these are going to go ahead. And I've just been looking up as well, seeing that BP are talking about getting out of the North Sea completely now. So it makes it all the more likely, because it's not about, I don't think anyway, I'm no expert, but it's not about the price of oil internationally and all that type of stuff. I know all of that. I've picked up enough about it's a world market, but it's about the Scottish and British economy in that way, that it's about a functioning sector that hasn't been able to shift to renewables quickly enough, or even showing any interest in, say, wave energy or that at all. So what their concern is, above all, is the industry within Aberdeen. It still certainly counts for Scotland, but I would say that it counts for the UK as well. I mean, and they're even arguing amongst themselves, it seems, about the levy that got put on energy. The SNP were criticising the what Starmer did with the energy levy. So this is going to go ahead, I would say. I'd be willing to take you up a $5 bet on that, Jack, if you like. And it's the Norwegians particularly that are really keen on it. The Norwegian Labour government are looking at getting a whole load of North Sea fields functioning again, apparently 70 different fields. So obviously, environmentally, this is a disaster, but economically, they are looking on it as a necessity. Okay.
Thanks, Tam. Go ahead, John Smithy.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Nigel Farage has said, what comes after a reform government? Jack said in 2017, I remember him holding up a copy of the Financial Times Saturday edition after the 2017 general election, where he said they had a graphic which said, and Jack repeated it several times, two-party system. Now, the thing is, dialectics have changed that into its opposite. Now we have a 6 or 7 party system. But the thing is, across the UK, we've only got Reform as the national party. John Curtis, the psephologist, has said this, that Reform is the only national party now. But the other thing is, although we got a 6 or 7 party system, in most areas it's between two parties. Where I live in Finland, it's a choice between Reform and the Tories. In London, it's a choice between Labour and the Greens. Up north, it's a choice between Labour and Reform. In my training when I was in the militant, it said that there's three aspects of Marxism: dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and Marxist economics. And I think the most important at the moment is dialectics. Now, whilst trying not to be like the Communist Party in Germany when Hitler came to power, and where the communists said, first the Hitler and then us. But dialectically, isn't it possible that after reform, government, and that lets people down, just like Trump in America, the possibilities are wide open, and couldn't there be a swing to the left around the world, but also in Britain? But the thing is, what is missing is a revolutionary Marxist party. And I think that's what we got to work towards in preparation for what follows. Because when people become disillusioned with reform, there's going to be a big change. Because what's happened, you had the Corbyn surge where people were looking for a way out. Then they tried Boris Johnson. Then they've tried Starmer. Now they've tried the Greens, and then they're trying reform. What comes after that? Thank you.
Thanks, John. That's right. They can only swing towards what's on offer, can't they? And if we haven't offered them a Communist Party, then they can't swing towards it. Mike, you're going.
Yeah, I'm skeptical about the idea of a swing to the left after a reform government, because I would expect a reform government to bring in additional legislation to make it increasingly. You'd think a reform government would be like the Orbán government in Hungary. Yeah, that is to say, it would increase sharply executive control over elections and over the press and over press and media and over the judiciary. And so it sort of, if Farage actually gets in, it's going to be a long fucking time before you'll get him out. That said, more other issues, and we want to take over big states. When we say states in that context, what we mean is territories. We don't mean we want to take over the British monarchy. The state is the special organised bodies of armed men. We want that wants to be smashed. Yeah? But we want to take over the biggest possible capitalist territory, and the reason is because it's inevitably not going to be the case that the working class will take power simultaneously worldwide. It's practically not feasible. It is feasible for the working class to take power simultaneously on a continental scale. The comrades who are saying in favour of the Greens, I think the problem about this is, look at the German Greens, who were the big hope of the left in the 1980s, and are now the most warmongering party in the Bundestag. Look at Brighton Green Council and its battle to screw over the bin men. Look at it's some time back, but not that far back, the Green Coalition with the Conservatives on Oxfordshire City Council. Yeah. So the great belief in the Greens as a left wing, inherently left wing movement. You really just have to. It's not a question of saying. It isn't so much a question of that there was a far right roots to it. It's the much more recent history of Greens as a movement in Europe. And similarly, in terms of breaking the Nouveau Front Populaire, the two parties which have broken the Nouveau Front Populaire because they're opposed to the supposed, quote, anti-Semitism, unquote, of La France Insoumise, meaning its support for the Palestinians, are the Socialist Party and Les Verts, the Greens. Similar issues in relation to the nationalists. It's sort of weird that one think of, after the Scottish, we've had how many years of Scottish National Party government? Tam will know better than me.
19.
90. What do we think of the Scottish National Party? Does the Scottish National Party represent a left alternative to Labour? Fuck all. Absolutely not. Plaid are able to talk more left because they've been nowhere near government. So what Plaid are going to do with the leadership of the Senedd, leave aside the fact it's a minority, but it's going to be the same issue. And the underlying issue Jack referred to relates to Toby's talk about the Greens as the left alternative. The trouble is, and on this one, Ant is actually right, the decay of the US-led capitalist order and of the British state, Britain has, I've said this before, Britain has been running at a loss since the middle 1980s. It's been running at a loss and filling that gap partly with the earnings on financial services, which Jack made the point. If the ultra rich leave, then the financial service industry goes down the tubes, and the British income from tax is partly by borrowing, and the borrowing arises because the low tax and low regulation regime makes Britain an attractive place for oligarchs, thieves from other states, the ultra rich to park their money. This is why the Cameron government, the Cameron government, actually all the Tory governments were very unwilling to actually enforce US sanctions against Russia because it's problematic from the point of view of Britain making itself an attractive place to park money. It's why nothing can be done about the asset strippers who have taken over and stripped the assets of the water companies and are now pumping sewage into Britain's rivers, because if you do dump on the asset strippers of the water companies, no asset strippers are going to want to buy the hospitals or any of the other public assets, which the UK government has been getting by with selling, like the bloke who's going bust and he sells the furniture in his house in order to keep paying for meals. The consequence of that, there is no space. The Mandalite, Duncan Chappell has been writing stuff and Phil Hurst has been writing stuff about the failure of these broad front parties. There is no political space for a victorious broad front left party. There's no space. It's not reasonable to say, okay, we have to meet people where they are and we have to advocate left social democracy because that's what people need. There is no space for a revolutionary party. There isn't space for a left reformist party. The choice which is available is Sanchez in Spain and Podemos as a left hanger on. Or if the your party had got anywhere, but it isn't got it. All it would be is as a left hanger on to Starmer, or not Starmer, but whatever the hell left leader. So it's sort of the left clings to its John Smithy dialectics, yes, but the trouble is that where the dialectic is moving to is not to after Farage us. It's moving to the dialectic of moving to the right, but at the same time, the alternative has to be something which is much more radical. Just another odd instance of this left. The Socialist Workers' Party are claiming responsibility of stand up to racism for the failure of reform to take a single council seat or get anything like a respectable vote in Oxford. And my response to that was, excuse me, Oxford is a weird place. It's got 2 universities and negligible unemployment, really seriously negligible. 2 universities, a German car plant and a large hospital, that's the town. Absolutely negligible unemployment. It voted sort of 80 to 90% for Remain in the Euro referendum. This is not, so that the problem is not that their response is you're being you're not taking the threat of reform seriously. Well, I take the threat of reform seriously. I just don't believe that leafleting for vote anybody other than reform actually achieves the result of people not voting reform. What's causing people not to vote reform in Oxford is the particular political dynamics of Oxford. And that's the sort of just the way in which the left clings and clings and clings to illusions. That's it.
Yeah, hope springs eternal, doesn't it? Jack, time to sum up.
Yeah, I think so, Stan. Okay. And to me, I agree with some of the things you said, Ant, but I disagree with tons of it. So I won't, what's the word, deal with everything, but just very briefly. Should the CPGB, when it was formed, stand for Irish independence? I would go, yeah, because the Irish wanted it. Should we have gone, wait for the revolution? Should we have stood for Indian independence? Or should we just say that is a demand that we're going to put off till after the revolution, or ignore? I think precisely that you don't win. You don't make the working class into the potential ruling class unless you've got positive answers on these questions. So I think, to me, it's equivalent of saying, I mean, do we stand for the right of men and women to divorce? Oh, this is an irrelevance in our historical period, because the key question is proletarian revolution. I don't think you will get proletarian revolution until the working class take the lead in all such questions. So I'm not just singling out national independence, which I think, not independence from the capitalist system, but political independence, for example, from the British Empire, I think is achievable, was achievable. So I do think that we need to, raise a whole series of demands and precisely equip the working class with those sort of politics so it can become the ruling class. Okay, unite the left. We're not talking about uniting the left through some process of diplomatic agreement. With the word we use, would be reforge, for example, the Communist Party, which we try to indicate through fire, through struggle. So it isn't some diplomatic agreement between us and the SWP or SPEW or whatever. We're talking about a process of splits and fusions, but precisely coming out with a Communist Party. So the question is, do we dismiss the existing left? I think that would be a profound mistake. Do we just say, well, these people aren't the raw material or don't have a contribution to potentially make? I think they do. And if we look at the formation of communist parties, even in the 20s, which were very favorable situation. I mean, we had, again, maybe you would disapprove, but to me, the making of the Communist Party in Germany precisely was the winning of that Congress in Halle, where it voted by I think it was a narrowish margin to precisely make the Communist Party into a mass party that had deep roots in the working class. So I'm not saying the SWP's that, by the way, but nonetheless, I think that's the sort of perspective we've got. So no diplomacy, no what's the word, 80-20 formula. The 20 is crucial as far as we're concerned. We have to have agreement on a program. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I'm glad I saw your posting on the chat, and I was going to quote to you the 8-hour day or the 10-hour day. I think we can make gains. It's necessary that we make gains. I mean, Marx's argument was, and I think there's a truth there, if workers, for example, are working a 14, 15, 16-hour a day, how on earth can they become a future ruling class? I mean, they're just exhausted and they're being killed off physically. So we need a health service. We need a health service. We need an education system. You know, we need to be able to learn to read and write if we're going to become a ruling class. So these are all things we can and must fight for, you know, under capitalism. And I reject the idea that we have universal suffrage now because of the generosity of the ruling class, or we have an NHS. I just don't think you've been reading the same history as I have done, Anne. I think these are gains that the working class have made, that they are gagging as a ruling class. Maybe they're not so vocal nowadays, but they hate universal suffrage if we vote the wrong way. They don't like the National Health Service. They don't like universal education, except for factory fodder. I've experienced it, right? So I think these are gains, and we need to fight for more gains and not take a cynical view that this is us bowing our head. No, we win precisely when we're confident, when we're powerful, and when we're a danger to them. You don't win anything if you bow your head. They take it away. That's what's been going on for the last, 30, 40 years? So yeah, we bowed our heads, and that hasn't gained us anything. Again, you've corrected yourself, but there's only one direction: worse. No, that's not the right approach. The only way that working class is going to come to power is the fight to make things better, and the partial realization, at least, of that. We need more democracy. We need more education. We need better health in order for the working class to come to power. That doesn't mean a stagist or an evolutionary road to socialism, but we need to make gains, and we need to make the working class confident. And it's not an act of desperation when you go for revolution. It's an act of power. It's an act of supreme confidence in our abilities. The Russian working class went for revolution because it felt powerful and because it thought Germany would join them. So this was an act of a powerful class, not an act of desperation that we've been crushed and we've got no alternative but to go for a revolution. It doesn't work like that. Okay. Mike's explained what we mean by states. We mean Germany. I try to give the example of Marx. Marx wasn't out to take the Prussian monarchy. Lassalle might have been. Marx was out to unite Germany under the leadership of what he called the democracy, but the working class. That was the project. We wanted Germany so we can do something serious in Europe. You're not capable of doing anything serious in, no insult to Baden-Baden. I don't really know where it is other than in Germany somewhere, and it's small. But you can't do anything in Baden-Baden. You can't do anything in Scotland. You can't do anything in Ireland. You can't do anything in Barbados. You cannot do anything serious in Britain, right? That's why we're talking Europe as a starting point. So we're talking continents, right? As somewhere that then you can aspire for the world revolution. Britain, yeah, could be this or that, but there's only 60 million of us. Scotland, I mean, what, 5 million, 6 million? You'll just be crushed, or you'll be reduced to poverty. And instead of being an inspiration, you become an example. If you went for a revolution, you'd become like Scotland, or you'll become like Britain, or you become like Cuba. That's not an inspiration. I mean, go to America and try to sell Cuba. There are so many Cubans in America that will tell you that's crazy. It is crazy. So no, North Sea oil, what's left of it, or North Sea gas, will not transform the Scottish economy. It's a lie. And if it's a done deal, it could be a deal that my argument was, Tam, if it's a done deal, it's not going to open up just like that. It might be economical at, what's the price of oil at the moment? $120 a barrel. It might be economic. But if it goes down to 60, well, these investors just pull out, or they'll calculate that. And at the moment, the market precisely is volatile because of politics. But I mean, is there such a thing as a natural price? But the natural price, what, is 60? That's been the sort of, so my argument fundamentally is this is not going to transform the finances for the SNP, the Labour Party. It's not going to transform British finances. British finances are not reliant on the North Sea oil. They're reliant on the city. That isn't going to change with opening up a few marginal fields in the North Sea, because that's what we're talking about. There's plenty of oil out there elsewhere that's a lot cheaper. Okay, we can talk about a bet some other time, but I don't mind a fiver on all of that. I mean, it's a very risky bet, but I don't mind a fiver. As a throwaway. We'll donate it both to the Weekly Worker so that only the Weekly Worker can gain. I'm saying that within the lifetime of this Scottish Parliament, these oil fields will not transform the Scottish economy. They might not even be open. That'll be my bet. You're witnesses. I can't remember what I was waving around John Smithy in terms of the Financial Times. My conviction is still that the two-party system tends towards a two-party system. If I got it right, yeah. The first past the post, maybe I was talking shit. The first past the post system tends towards a two-party system, right? Hence, precisely, I think serious talk, that if you listen to Farage, he's rejected his previous rejection of a coalition deal with the Tories, precisely for the reason that in Wales, people are saying, if you want to stop reform, vote Plaid. That shows you, even with Wales's very complex election system, that is the McSweeney strategy. I know he's gone, but I think the strategy remains. The Starmer strategy, and I suspect Burnham and all these people, next general election in Labour will be it's either Labour or it's reform. If you don't want reform, you've got to vote Labour. That will be because you're talking about a government. If you vote Green, their argument would be this is a wasted vote. So in the United States, okay, for all sorts of other reasons, but you end up with two-party. In Britain, you end up with two-party with, yes, you're right, exceptions like Irish politics and now Scottish politics. But even in Scotland, there will be a tendency in that direction. That would be my argument. But then you've got PR, and that's precisely changes things. Anyway, my argument still is that there is, yes, a tendency towards that. And so precisely, Zach Polanski himself talking about a coalition with Labour, but not with Starmer. That's because Starmer's unpopular at the moment. But Burnham, I mean, so in other words, yes, you do have that tendency. Okay. I think it's been made, the comments have made the argument. I don't think that, I mean, my argument is very strong on this. I don't mean it's a strong argument. I'm very insistent on it. That's what I mean, is that it's not a question of reform has a government and then people get demoralized with it and then they turn to the left. It's not going to happen. people could turn to any nonsense, but they're not going to turn. And if it is the left, it will be a stupid left that buggers things up. But I think things will move to the right. That's where things are going at the moment. So the key question to me is precisely the left. And that's what we're banging on about. And it's not Toby's economism, Toby, that leads to a Communist Party or to left conclusions. I think just history disproves that. You know, that we do have a successful, at least in my view, not in terms it went to communism, but we do have an example of a successful proletarian revolution led by this thing called the Bolshevik Party that was copied. And again, we can get into the faults and all the rest of it. But one thing that both wings, but certainly the Bolsheviks, were united around: reject economism, reject the idea that there's a trade unionist route, that there's an economic struggle route towards the working class precisely becoming this hegemonic class that can master all politics. That was what was rejected with the Bolsheviks. That was what was rejected by the RSDLP at their second Congress. That was successful. The Bolsheviks won elections. The Bolsheviks won the workers' vote in the Tsarist Duma. The Bolsheviks win the working class constituency in the cities in 1970. Overwhelmingly win the working class in the cities. To me, that's the route. Precisely, that's why we shouldn't be trailing the Greens, the Scottish Nationalists, or the Liberal Democrats, if you want something, you know. This is the road precisely to the perpetuation of wage slavery and the working class just being treated as idiots, voting fodder by one party or another. And remember, you know, the right can come out with radical pro-working class slogans. So the Tories are quite capable of coming out with what appeals to workers, but it'd be British workers or maybe even English workers. I don't know. So no, we do need precisely, I think anyway, a political program. It's a political program, a political theory that comes first, not economic struggles. The working class will carry out economic struggles without Toby, without me. They don't need us to go, I need more money to survive. Oh, thank you, Toby. You've told me I need more money to survive. That's really helpful. No, they need you precisely because you've got some idea of history, some idea of theory, some idea of politics, and that is crucial. So we need to become the ruling class, and therefore we need to precisely have answers on Scotland, Wales, the environment, you know, women's rights, gay rights, trans rights. These issues cannot be put aside or followed. We need our own politics. And I think, again, Mike, I love the Oxford story. If the SWP is saying we're responsible for defeating reform in Oxford, what about the rest of the country then? Are they responsible for reform doing so well? I would say yes, they are, because what it does, it puts the left in the camp of the establishment that people who are voting reform are rebelling against. You know, there we were, you know, on the last demonstration, there I'll be on the next demonstration, marching with Democrats from America, the Greens, the Liberal Democrats, along with the church. We just put ourselves in the camp of the bourgeois establishment. We need to be against the bourgeois establishment, not the tail of the bourgeois establishment. So yeah, I blame the SWP. Okay, so in Oxford, reform did badly, but they did well in London, they did well in the north, they did well in Scotland, they did well in Wales. You know, if you're Nigel Farage, I mean, I've given you the statistics. The idea that he's saying it was stop the stand up to racism that stopped me, that stymied me. This is risible. This is delusion. And precisely, it puts off the necessity of getting serious about the working class constituting itself a party that's independent from all factions of the bourgeoisie, whether they're what's the colour of bloody Reform? Bluish or something like that, isn't it? Anyway, whatever shade of blue it is, and whatever shade of green it is, or whether shade of orange, or the red and yellow of Labour.
Purple.
Purple. Is it purple? I thought it was some sort of puce colour. Anyway, the point I'm saying is we should be independent of all of that. That's the working class. That's it.
Labour, red, white, and blue, John.
That's true as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So apologies for the next short meeting. Okay, sorry.
Turquoise, yeah.
Can't be helped. Okay, comrades, next week, 5 o'clock. Be there or be square. Okay, bye-bye.